Welcome to All Grown Up Now, Tales of a Checkered Past. I'm Kenneth D. King, podcasting from my studio near Union Square in New York City. This podcast is an evolution of the tale, All Grown Up Now, A Friendship in 3 Acts. This is Season 2, and it's called Tales of a Checkered Past. It's a collection of short stories from my salad days on up to the present. In each podcast, another self-contained story will be presented. Enjoy. I've taken a little summer hiatus, but I have come back with episode 90, which is a funny little story that I call Telephone Etiquette. These days, what with caller ID, it's possible to know who is calling, and we have the luxury of deciding whether or not to answer. It wasn't always that way, though. Now, as part of my education in my early days in San Francisco, one of the things I learned from my dear departed friend Susan was proper telephone etiquette. Darling angel, remember your phone etiquette. Just because someone answers, that doesn't mean they have time to chat, she insisted. After identifying yourself, your next question is always, is this a good time to talk? Susan went on to explain that giving the person you called the opportunity to decide whether to talk then or later was an important common courtesy. So, even in these days of caller ID, if I call someone and they pick up, I like to ask, is this a good time to talk? Proper telephone etiquette. When I was still living in San Francisco, I had an acquaintance who I'll refer to as the Time Bandit. The Time Bandit was a gal of a certain age. She started out as a beautiful young debutante in Dallas who married the dashing young medical student. She put him through medical school, he became a doctor, and when he became successful, he traded her in for a younger model. Typical story. Some of my other society acquaintances who also knew her said that she had divorced well. This meant that she didn't work, didn't need to. Perhaps there were some boards or charities she served on, but the bulk of her days weren't spoken for. In other words, she had too much time on her hands. As an aside, my friend Jackie and I called her the Time Bandit because we discovered that if we ever called her by her given name, which I will not mention here, she showed up like magic, and not in a good way. That said, the Time Bandit took to showing up at my studio unannounced, wanting to go for lunch or tea. It never occurred to her that I might be busy, or that she should at least call ahead first to see if I was there. I guess that, in her mind, I was at loose ends as well, and needed entertaining. I wasted many productive afternoons if I answered the door, because I couldn't get rid of her. She was a Time Bandit. It was the same story if I had the bad luck to answer the phone when she called. Generally, I would let my machine answer. For my younger listeners, answering machines were what we had before voicemail. This was still in the days before caller ID and call waiting as well. Since I had no caller ID, if I was waiting for an important call, I had to pick up. And that's when she would call. She seemed to have a sixth sense about her timing. Once I said hello, the Time Bandit would just verbally steamroller over me, and I could count on a half hour gone before I got a word in edgewise. I just hope and pray that I wouldn't miss the important call in the meantime. Eventually, I moved to New York. During my first year here, I had my first bad experience with the phone company. The building that butts up against mine was undergoing a renovation. Part of that renovation was expanding the building into the tiny little triangle of backyard that was connected to both our buildings. You know, New York real estate, it's valuable. Unbeknownst to me, the terminal box for the entire corner of 18th and Broadway was in that tiny little backyard. As construction progressed, The contractors built the extension of the building over the terminal box, which disconnected phone service to all of the buildings on 18th Street and Broadway.
Uh-oh.
After several frustrating calls to the phone company, I finally got a real person on the line. "So, what's the story?" I asked. "My internet and phone have been down for 2 weeks." "Well," he drawled, "the contractors built over the terminal box." "I heard," I responded. "What does this mean?" "Well, we need to build a new terminal box." "Okay," I asked. "When is that going to happen?" Unconcerned, he said, "Oh, it could be 3 weeks or it could be 3 months. I don't know." And this is when I found my inner New Yorker. "That doesn't do me any fucking good," I shouted. "You better get me on the phone with someone who can actually help me instead of jerking me off." Now, I was momentarily shocked at myself. I had never talked that way to someone on the phone in San Francisco. What would Susan say? "Oh, okay then," he said briskly. Then I heard a click and a line ringing. The next man I got on the line was far more interested in helping me, even going so far as to give me his phone number. He said that in a few days I get a call from a technician to set up a time to come to my place to repair the line. If I didn't hear from him, give him a call. And, as it turns out, the next day, I got a call to set up an appointment. The technician would come the following afternoon around 3 o'clock. Soon, my phone would be fixed. The next day, promptly at 3, my buzzer rang. I buzzed the technician in, and I could hear him tromping up the steps. Then there was a knock on my door. I opened it. The sight that greeted me was a hunky Anderson Cooper type, wearing a tight white t-shirt, blue jeans, work boots, and he had a tool belt. He smiled, and I was blinded by the blue eyes and the white teeth. He had dimples as well. I thought of him as Mr. Hunky. "May I come in?" he asked. "Where does your phone line come into the building?" I, of course, invited him in and showed him where the line was, which was next to the window. He opened the window and leaned way out. I, of course, enjoyed the nice view from where I was standing. Then I heard him chuckle. "Come here, I want to show you something." So I walked over to the window. We both leaned out. He pointed out a wire that led from my building and looped haphazardly along the buildings all the way back to 17th Street. "Wow, it looks like someone ran an extension cord from 17th Street, I said. "They did," he chuckled. "You must have really rattled someone's cage to get that." And then he paused and looked at me with those blue eyes. Mr. Hunky got to work, making sure my line was operating properly, all the while chatting and flirting. This particular afternoon was shaping up to be quite promising. Did I mention he had a tool belt? When he finished, he packed up his gear. Then he stood to leave and paused and raised an eyebrow. And then the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was the Time Bandit. "I'll let it go to voicemail," I said. "Oh no," he replied. "Answer it. I want to see if it works." But, you don't understand," I stammered. "Go ahead, I'll wait." I picked up the phone. "Kenneth, what are you doing? I had a horrible day. Muffy and I went to the junior league, and she was wearing pink, which I really hate pink on her. And it was just so terrible because she was so There was no way I could break in. It was a torrent, a fire hose of words. Finally, Mr. Hunky gave me a sad look and said, "I have to go." "Okay, bye," I said. and he was gone. From then on, I have hated her with the heat of 1,000 suns. So, dear listeners, remember this story and what my dear departed friend Susan used to say. Darling angel, remember your phone etiquette. Just because someone answers doesn't mean they have time to chat. Thanks for listening. You can get the audiobook All Grown Up Now on iTunes, Audible, and Amazon, or from my website, allgrownupnow.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play. If you have any questions, you can reach me through the website, allgrownupnow.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Kenneth D. King, on Facebook at Kenneth D. King Design, or on my main website, KennethDKing.com.